This is part of the vicious circle. That the political uncertainty produces short-term thinking, which produces poverty, which produces political volatility, which So the question is, where do you break that cycle? I think what you're describing is absolutely correct. The short-termism is a big enemy, and the high interest rates also, right?
Yeah.
So the higher interest rates is really part of the problem, and in one sense it's a problem of the lack of entrepreneurship. But I think the entrepreneurship is there if we can make the conditions better for the entrepreneurs, right? They could think more long term. I think that will be possible. So yeah, that is an important point. But you see, at the core of today's world economic order is the theory of David Ricardo. Have you heard about comparative advantage? If you could, yeah, most of you have. Okay. The comparative advantage is the idea that you should do what you're least bad at doing, right? And this is really, really at the core. So I think we'll do that now. David Ricardo wrote in 1817, at a time when the only industrialized country in the world was England. And the Americans at the time were saying, you only developed this theory because you want to have a monopoly in industrial goods, right? So the Americans called their bluff, the bluff of the English, very early. But the problem is that the Americans then took over, when they themselves got rich, they took over the same theory, right? And the clue here is that David Ricardo's theory is based on the barter of labor hours, right? So David Ricardo forces us to think that what the world economy is about countries bartering, exchanging one labor hour for another labor hour. And whether that labor hour is in growing wheat or in producing spaghetti, that doesn't matter. If that, we all understand that, if you take the biggest hospital in Kiev, and you take all the people who wash the floor, put them in one country, and then you take all the surgeons and put them in another country, you will have one rich country with surgeons and one much poorer with people sweeping the floor. That common sense evades the people to the left, because to them a labor hour is a labor hour. And this is where if you are at one point, I think if we try to improve the Ukraine situation, that is the core. This is the core of an argument that you can say economists don't tell their children, my daughter, you are so good at washing dishes, so you should make a career washing dishes in restaurants. No economists say that to their children, but they say it to the Ukrainian children. Right? This is unethical. Right? It is deeply unethical. Once you see what's happening, and as I was saying to Victor, I got very annoyed by this Swede at the forum who was saying. It was like saying to the Ukraine, well, yes, you have behaved a little bit better, but if you behave even more, we'll give you more candy, kind of thing, right? We'll give you more. That was, and knowing that Sweden has several times done exactly what the Ukraine has to do, which is temporarily protect their manufacturing industry. Sweden started doing that in the 1700s, and then they did it again in the 1800s, and then they did it again after World War II.
So Ricardo loses productivity of labor?
No, it's an hour for an hour. Well, he uses productivity, yes, but it doesn't matter what the productivity is in. So if he uses an example of wheat, of wine and cloth. His example is Portugal and England. And Portugal produces port wine, and England produces cloth, right? So that is his example. But you could just as well use my example of washing dishes versus having an education, right? So that's the thing. You can, in the Ricardian model, you can have a comparative advantage in being poor. At the bottom of, if there is a ladder of skills, right? You can be the world's most efficient dishwasher, right? I mean, washer of dishes. I mean, it's not a machine, but a person. And I think this is crucial. And once you get people to think intuitively, all this is intuitively makes sense. But if you have brainwashed enough, if you have 3 generations of economists who have brainwashed that this is the age of commerce rather than the age of manufacturing, you're not getting anywhere. So, just to briefly work through with you, there are other types of stages. This is the one we had: hunting and fishing, pastoral, agricultural, and then another German economist who, well, you find that I've written about these things, but then you have independent domestic economy and the clan economy. If you go to Zimbabwe, where I've been 3 times in the last couple of years, you find that Mr. Mugabe is trying to run Zimbabwe in that mode, like a big clan. And that looks very corrupt. It is corrupt, but you know, but you have to. And I think it's very useful to understand where he's coming from. He's not only nuts. He's actually trying to use a model that works fine on a small level. And if you ask a Zimbabwean how many people are in your clan, they will say a couple of thousand. They know about a couple of thousand individuals that are in their clan, which is remarkable. At least to me, it's remarkable. So he's trying to run the economy like that. And of course, inside the family, you favor your own people. And I spoke to the Norwegian ambassador in Harare, in Zimbabwe, and he told me that he was the first Norwegian ambassador to South Sudan. And into the Minister of Economy's office one day walks his nephew. And he pulls out a gun and he shoots him. He shoots him because he has not given enough jobs to people of his clan. But can you see that from one point of view it makes sense? That, you know, you don't feed your neighbor's children before you feed your own children. Come on, right? You want to feed your neighbors also if you can, but if you have to choose, you choose your own, right? So these are logics that are things that are logical in one context, which becomes pretty bad when they use in another context, right? Inside the family, Mr. Mugabe's logic is okay. And here I think there is a similarity with what's happening in the former Soviet sphere. Because there is a very interesting book written by an American who knows Russia very well, When Money Dies. And he writes about the fact that there was a shortage of money and there was a lot of barter. There was a lot of barter of favors, right? That in the Soviet economy, because of the planned economy, because of the inefficiency, you know, even to improve the system, the managers of the companies actually had to help each other outside the plan because the plan was bad. So they had to trade favors, right? And they traded favors for the good of the country. And also, if you were an individual, you wanted to see the doctor or the dentist, you brought little gifts, etc., right? So, and some of the corruption in former Soviet countries, I think, come from this bartering of favors. Of course, when you're talking favors of $20 million, it's a different thing. But there is something here which in the West looks like corruption, but in effect was efficient under an inefficient planned economy. Just to just to put corruption also in a kind of perspective, not to defend it, but to see that some of this stuff was legitimate in the old system. Barter economy, and from the labor standpoint, this is a time where you slaughter your enemies. It's before you understand that you can actually use your enemies as slaves. And women doing all the work, right? Africa, and the beginning of slavery. And then you get slavery and you get serfdom. You get the main European model before capitalism was feudalism. And feudalism was based on serfdom, right? 1% owned the land and 99% lived on that land. And the one interesting fact which a historian actually pointed out to me is there were only 3 countries in Europe that did not have feudalism. Switzerland, Iceland, and Norway, which happened to be the 3 countries that never joined the EU. You know, when I say that in Brussels, people get very upset. Well, not upset, but there is something there. You know, I think, coming from Norway, we twice voted for the EU, and I twice voted yes, but the majority voted no, right? Because I think they saw Brussels as a kind of a feudal landlord, which it wasn't, but which it now is, I think. If you look at how the Ukraine is treated in the trade, they are in a sense like a feudal landlord. So, luck and magic, sacrificial and slave labor. I think what happens with capitalism and with manufacturing is the demystification of the world. This is Max Weber. When you get people into factories, something happens mentally that luck and magic disappears, right? And something also happens to religion. Handicraft, town economy, money economy, free labor governed by custom and trade. So there is something here about the town economy going with handicraft, that when the town started growing, that made people free. In many countries in Europe, if you were a serf, kind of a slave on a feudal farm, if you managed to escape and hide in the city for 1 year, you would be free. So the Germans have this expression that city air makes free. If you can escape to the city, it will make you free. And also, capitalism wasn't born in England. It was born in the Italian city-states, in the same places where democracy was born. Florence, Venice, Genoa, and also a bit later Amsterdam. If you think of all the terms in bookkeeping, they're all Italian terms, because bookkeeping was invented in Italy. And bankruptcy, which the EU should now recognize that some countries should go bankrupt. Greece, to start with, should be allowed to go bankrupt. That comes from Venice, where the first bankers had their desks, and when they didn't pay, when they didn't fulfill their commitments, somebody came up with an axe. The people who lost money came with an axe, and they smashed the counter. So bancarotta is a smashed counter. So it literally comes from that. So all these terms, giro, conto, all these things are yes, saldo, yes, agio, all these things. So for, and in music also, these two things. If you look at the scriptures in music and bookkeeping is all Italian. Forte non troppo and these things. Then you have industrial, universal, competition as an ideal, concentration and integration. This graph is from an American economist from 1903. Okay, but it's still valid. You see, universal competition as an ideal, but then you have to have, there's too much competition, and you get concentration, and you get integration, and you get trust, which you also do now. You see companies buying up each other. National economy, and then they say, well, we're going to have a global economy after that. And I think it's very important that Bruno Hildebrand, writing in the 1850s, he was saying, well, first you have barter, and then you have money, but then it will be credit. Credit, there's talk now in Norway, the banks want to get rid of cash. Yes. Individual, from the standpoint of labor, individual contract with increasing regulation by the state, group contract and regulation by statute. This is the way it worked until the fall of the Berlin Wall, in a sense. The labor had a monopoly, and some monopoly rights. There were trusts in business, these big companies, but labor also was a kind of trust. That trust being people who organize and make a monopoly of power. And I think if we look now that we understand the Cold War and the whole period since Marx produced his Communist Manifesto, I grew up in a country with a border to the Soviet Union, and that was very scary. We were very scared. And I thought communism was an awful system. Absolutely. It was awfully scary. Now I think we can see that communism actually served a purpose. It served the purpose of making capitalists understand that they had to share. Right? Because there was a credible threat. There was a credible threat to capitalists, and therefore, they let wages grow at the pace of productivity growth. Right. So this was what the French economists called the Fordist wage regime. That when productivity goes up, wages go up. Right. So for a very long time, from the 1880s up until 1970s and 80s, the share of wages in the economy, the percentage of the economy that was wages, was very stable. And strangely enough, in the 1930s, if you look at the data in the United States, the share of wages in GDP actually increased. Because many people lost their jobs, but those who kept their jobs kept their wages. Right? And so actually, in terms of percentages, the capitalists lost more than the laborers. Yeah? So let's say 10% more or something like that. But it's significant that percentage-wise, as a percentage of GDP, capitalists actually lost more than the workers during the 1930s because of this irreversibility of wages. Wages couldn't go down. The labor unions made sure that wages couldn't go down. So there are some interesting things which I think came out of this step.
Not in Ukraine.
Not in Ukraine. No. Yes, and this is, I think this is what happened with the fall of the Berlin Wall. That ratchet wheel, a wheel which could only move in one direction. In mechanics, you have that. That came to an end with the fall of the Berlin Wall. So that's when we see the role of having the credible threat, communism as a credible threat. And here we enter into something which is maybe, I think, we've unlearned, and this is important for the Ukraine. The link between economic structure and population carrying capacity. If you go to the Amazon, you will find that 2 persons per square kilometer is a lot, because if you hunt and gather, you need a pretty big territory to feed yourself. So sustainable population in that situation is very low. Agricultural societies did I get something about? Well, I got some kind of warning thing there. But agricultural societies, normally you can get up to 40. So if there is an overpopulation in agricultural societies, people move. Eritrea is a country where I've been working, and you saw that when population moved to when the population reached 50 persons per square kilometers, the Eritreans had to leave. And where did they go? Well, they went to Holland, for instance. And Holland, there are 400 persons per square kilometer. Right? Nobody would say that Holland is actually overpopulated. But this is determined by the economic structure. You saw it very clearly in Latvia that when it got deindustrialized, people had to leave. So more than 20%, or about 20% of the Latvian population actually left the country. So I made that point in Brussels that if you deindustrialize, you're going to create a lot of refugees, right? Of people moving. So that's an argument for industrialization. So if the EU wants to create a lot of refugees, well, they continue with the policy they have. If they want to keep the Ukrainians, make it possible for them to make a living where they are, well, then they should industrialize. So only nations with a large manufacturing sector are able to feed a large population. I think this is very important. And another thing, if you look at where in the world there are famines, where people die from hunger, it's always countries where almost everyone produces food. India or Africa, where 80% of the population is in agriculture. Now, why is it that people who produce only food die from starvation, and countries where 2-3% of the population are in agriculture, like in the United States and Europe, we die from eating too much, right? These are the things, the kind of questions one should ask oneself, and then you see that this link, and this is not very well known now, but it was extremely well known after World War II, because after World War II there was a plan to deindustrialize Germany, because Germany had started 2 wars, and the century was not 50 years old, and they had started 2 wars, so the Allies decided they should punish Germany. And the worst punishment they could think of was to deindustrialize the country. So they prohibited the production of manufacturing in Germany. They filled the mines with cement or water or whatever, and the only thing they could manufacture was agricultural machinery. But then, the Russians came in and took away most of the machinery, and it was a disaster. But people in the western part of Germany, in the French zone, the English zone, and the American zone, they started moving into East Germany, because in East Germany they didn't have this Morgenthau plan, so they could still manufacture, and that worried the Americans no end, because they would see that the people were fleeing from capitalism into communism, right? Because it was a communism with manufacturing. So.
But why is Western Germany stayed more industrialized than East? Western Germany stays more industrialized.
Yeah, but I'm talking now 1946, huh? Okay. Yeah, and then the whole thing turned. Because President Truman sent a former president, a wise gentleman who was a mining engineer, Mr. Herbert Hoover, was sent to Germany.
Not for FBI.
No, not that. Not.
It's another.
That's another Hoover. That's Edgar Hoover. Yes.
Hoover Dam.
Yes, he's the one with the Hoover Dam. Absolutely. And the Hoover Dam was a government project that produced electricity, that made it possible to produce cheap aluminium, which made it possible for Mr. Boeing, who came by chance to Washington State to build airplanes. So there's a link from the Hoover Dam to why they actually produce airplanes there, because they had cheap aluminium. So, but Hoover was sent on a fact-finding mission, I think the Americans would call it. And the third letter he wrote from Germany was the end of March 1947, and he says there is only one problem with the deindustrialized Germany. There are 25 million Germans too many, and then he says this fantastic thing, which must have shook Washington. What shall we do with them? Should we kill them, or should we bring them somewhere else? If so, where? What do you do with the 25 million Americans, Germans that are superfluous when that can't be sustained, because they're going from the industrial society back to agriculture, right? And this phrase, I think, is probably the most important phrase in the 20th century. And it took 3 weeks, and the Americans turned the plan around very, very fast, and then at the Harvard commencement, I think it was the 6th of June 1947, the foreign minister, George Marshall, announces the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan is exactly the opposite of the Morgenthau Plan. It was to re-industrialize Germany, and while they were at it, they re-industrialized, they also put more industry into all the countries surrounding communism. This was a brilliant strategic move. How do you stop communism? Well, you make sure that the neighboring countries are so rich that they don't want communism. So it's starting in Japan, South Korea. They pumped a lot of money into South Korea. The interest rate in South Korea in the 50s and 60s was negative if you were in business. You got a minus 3% interest rate. Why? To stop communism in the north, right? And then, it was down to Taiwan, it was Turkey, it was Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, all over England, all the way up to Norway. So they made it a sanitary belt around communism. And what I don't understand is that the EU now does exactly the opposite to the Ukraine. Right? Exactly the opposite. Why don't they understand it? Well, partly because economics has changed completely, and partly because people don't read history. But this is a dramatic failure. This is a dramatic failure. That if I were the EU and saw that the pensions in Russia are 3 times the pensions in the Ukraine, and this is a kind of incentive for people to become Russians, right? I would try to stop that, but they're so ideological that I don't think. So I think this is something we should think about. How do we communicate this? Who should communicate it to? By what means? At what level? Because there are some people in the EU. The previous head of the think tank in Ispra, he understands this completely. So there are people within the EU who understands it, but not the politicians, right? So everyone talks about sustainability. Well, here is the importance of sustainability.